On June 25, 1876, Sergeant Daniel Kanipe of the U.S. 7th Cavalry participated in the Battle of the Little Bighorn, which is one of the most renowned confrontations in American history. As a member of Company C, Kanipe displayed extraordinary bravery and became one of the few who survived. His subsequent testimony during the Army's investigation provided crucial insights regarding Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and his troops. Kanipe continued his service in the Army after the conflict and ultimately authored a memoir titled The Kanipe Story, which is now regarded as a significant resource for comprehending the true events that transpired at Little Bighorn. His valor and commitment secured him a permanent place in military history. Before we commence, kindly like, subscribe, and activate the bell icon to support our channel and preserve these narratives. Our ill-fated expedition commenced on May 17, 1876, as we moved towards the Yellowstone River. After covering 12 miles, we established a camp near the Big Heart River, taking a moment to survey the surroundings. By June 10th, we progressed to the Powder River, where 6 of our 12 companies were dispatched for reconnaissance. We loaded 10 days' worth of rations onto mules and embarked on a 2-day trek upriver. Following indications of an Indian trail along the Rosebud River, we marched through the night, fueled solely by coffee and resolve. The following morning, upon realizing that our supplies were nearly depleted, General Reno, our leader, commanded a retreat back down the Rosebud. There we encountered the remaining 6 companies led by General Custer and General Terry, the department commander. At that moment, Custer was reportedly under arrest for confronting corrupt post merchants who were exploiting the troops, a scandal that traced back to President Grant's administration. Despite the prevailing tension, Custer soon regained his command. His troops were resupplied from the steamboat Far West, which carried 15 days' worth of provisions. None of us were aware at that time that we were merely days away from the calamity that would forever engrave the Battle of the Little Bighorn into American history. Custer was equipped with 2 Gatling guns and 2 Rodman cannons, yet he chose to relinquish them to General Gibbon, convinced that they would not be necessary. In hindsight, this decision proved to be a costly mistake. Had even a single Rodman been discharged, the result could have been significantly different. With just 1 Gatling gun, it is possible that the Custer massacre might never have occurred at all. We dismantled our camp and marched throughout the day on June 22nd. That evening, Custer issued strict instructions: no bugle calls, only hand signals, and fires kept small enough to merely brew coffee. The following morning, June 23rd, we set out once more, marching until dusk before taking a break. By June 24th, we arrived at a location where the Indians had recently performed a war dance and a sun dance. The ground was compacted and smooth, with cottonwood brush huts still standing as remnants of their gathering. Our Crow Scouts quickly discovered a grim reminder: the scalp of a white soldier from Gibbon's command, dangling from a willow branch. The Scouts' adversaries, the Sioux whom we were pursuing, erupted in wild enthusiasm, shouting, dancing, and nearly frenzied with rage. They presented the scalp to General Custer, who examined it before passing it around. Ultimately, it found its way to Sergeant Finley of my company, where it remained in his saddlebag at the time of his death. That night around 10 o'clock, our scouts returned with updates. It was dark, the kind of dim summer light that still allowed for reading at 9. We received orders to pack up and depart. Throughout the night, we advanced toward the confluence of the Little Bighorn and Rosebud rivers. Custer guided us into a concealed gully, an ideal location for remaining hidden. However, Quartermaster Sergeant Hurst lost some of the hard tack from the pack train during a brisk trot. Upon hearing this, Custer dispatched Hurst to recover it, only for the sergeant to discover 2 Indians already helping themselves to the fallen bread. When the Indians noticed our approach, they fled. Sergeant Hurst returned and reported the incident to General Custer, who promptly commanded us to prepare our horses. I initially believed he intended to launch an attack at dawn. However, given that the enemy was already aware of our proximity, he opted to strike that very night. We paused after ascending the divide, and Custer advanced with 2 scouts and Henry Voss, the chief trumpeter. 2 hours later, he returned and organized the regiment into 3 detachments. Major Reno was assigned companies A, M, and G. Captain Benteen received companies H, K, and D. Captain McDougal was tasked with guarding the pack train using Company B. Custer retained direct command over companies C, E, I, and F. Reno was stationed to Custer's left, with Benteen positioned even further left, and the strategy was evident. A three-pronged assault on the Indian village was planned. McDougal's pack train would follow the main trail behind us. We proceeded along what is now known as Benteen's Creek, where we discovered a recently deserted Indian camp, with fires still smoldering, and within one teepee lay a deceased warrior. Custer commanded that the teepee be set ablaze. Upon Reno's arrival, he was instructed to cross the creek, which he did, while Custer advanced with his companies. As we approached the confluence of Benteen's Creek in the Little Bighorn, I noticed Indians observing us from the bluffs. I informed First Sergeant Bobo, and Custer ordered troops C, I, and F to ascend the heights. Captain Tom Custer, the general's brother, led my company. We rode swiftly, but by the time we reached the summit, the Indians had disappeared. Although their extensive camp was visible across the valley, with teepees extending for miles, some Crow scouts attempted to sneak down to steal ponies, but gunfire forced them to retreat. Bloody Knife, Curly, and Chief Scout Mitch Boyer remained with us on the bluffs as we readied ourselves to strike. The men became increasingly restless, shouting when they finally spotted the camp below. I was next to Captain Tom Custer and Sergeant Finkel, who exclaimed that he was nearing his breaking point. None of us could have anticipated how close we were to the battle that would soon claim nearly every man present. Sergeant Finkel's horse was struggling. I called out, "Finkel, if you can, come on." However, he fell behind. At that moment, Captain Tom Custer instructed me to locate Captain McDougal and the pack train to convey urgent directives from General Custer. He instructed me to inform McDougal to relocate the packs to higher ground. If they become loose, he emphasized, do not pause to secure them. Instead, cut them loose and proceed swiftly. There is a significant Indian encampment ahead. I departed without delay. What I initially perceived as misfortune, being dispatched away, ultimately proved to be a lifesaver. Had Finkel not retreated, he would have received the order in my stead, and I might not be here to recount this tale. In the distance, I observed dust rising from the pack train, resembling a faint cloud. As my unit charged toward the Indian settlement, I rode in the opposite direction. Custer's last words continue to resonate in my memory. We were all riding vigorously when he shouted, "Hold your horses, boys! There is ample opportunity down there for each of us." After delivering the message to McDougal, I proceeded to Captain Benteen as instructed. By that time, Major Reno was withdrawing from the valley, with McDougal's troops ascending the bluffs to support him. Behind them lay chaos. Indians were shouting, gunfire was erupting, and men were succumbing under a barrage of arrows and bullets. Before we could reach them, warriors were already scalping the deceased. Dr. DeWolf was killed just as he reached the summit. A few more steps, and he might have survived. As I trailed Benteen back, I noticed riders approaching. I raised my weapon, prepared to fire, but they turned out to be frightened scouts fleeing the main conflict, racing all the way to the Powder River. I rejoined Benteen's battalion at the ridge, connecting with Reno and McDougal's forces. We were unable to reunite with Custer's men. The Indians had completely severed our path. When Reno attempted to advance down the bluffs, the warriors overwhelmed us, necessitating a retreat and the establishment of skirmish lines. We lost numerous brave men before we could withdraw. The Indians encircled us, firing incessantly until nightfall. Then, as dawn broke on June 26th, they attacked once more, their war cries reverberating through the valley as the second day of torment commenced. I cannot specify the exact number of casualties we inflicted, but it was significant. Nevertheless, the cost was devastating. 68 of our comrades were injured, and we found ourselves entirely deprived of water. It was agonizing to hear their pleas for a mere sip that we were unable to provide. A few attempted to reach the river. Most did not return. I will always remember the first shot fired during that 2-day siege, or it hit the ground close to me and zipped directly beneath my horse's belly. Lieutenants Harrington and Sturgis, along with 14 soldiers, were never located. Some claim that the Indians took their heads and paraded them through the camp during their night-long festivities. On the hilltop, we suffered the loss of 56 men. The gunfire on the 26th continued from morning until nightfall. By evening, we observed the Indian camp starting to move, with women packing their belongings while warriors continued to shoot at us. When dawn arrived on June 27th, the valley was eerily quiet. The Indians had vanished. We prepared coffee, gathered water, and cared for the wounded to the best of our abilities. Around 10 o'clock, General Gibbon and General Terry made their entrance. We erupted in cheers upon seeing them, and Terry, overwhelmed with emotion, broke down in tears. Then came the news that none of us wished to hear. Custer and his 4 companies had been annihilated, with 200 men dead in the valley below. For a while we had hoped they were merely trapped as we had been, but deep down, we already suspected the truth. Later that afternoon, I rode alongside Captain Benteen across the battlefield. The scene was unbearable. I recognized several acquaintances, including Sergeants Finkel and Finley. Finley lay next to his horse, 12 arrows embedded in him, still grasping the reins. They had been exposed to the sun for 2 days, disfigured beyond recognition. The women and young warriors had stripped every body, beating and stabbing any man who still clung to life. Not a single soldier remained in his uniform. The Indians had taken everything: weapons, boots, money, and nearly $25,000 in pay, which had been issued to us just days prior at Powder River. Thus it concluded. The dust settled, the valley fell silent, and the legend of Custer's last stand became forever etched in blood and sorrow. I witnessed where the last of them fell, gathered in a small pile. Custer lay across his men, his back barely grazing the ground, a bullet lodged in his heart. Surrounding him were his brother, Captain Tom Custer, and his brother-in-law, Lieutenant Calhoun of H Troop. There were nearly 4,000 warriors engaged in this final battle, part of a larger force numbering between 12 and 15,000 in total. Custer and his men had no chance. Not a single soldier survived to recount what transpired after that last stand. Only Comanche Captain Keogh's horse endured, riddled with 7 bullets when discovered. The field was strewn with both soldiers and fallen warriors. Approximately 75 Indians lay dead within 3 teepees, and more were carried away as the great camp continued its journey. I encountered one warrior, wrapped in buffalo robes. Upon cutting him loose, I discovered he bore 4 women's scalps, 2 with long red hair, strung together like trophies. The sight made me feel nauseous. I discarded them immediately. After the fighting ceased, we buried our dead and commenced the arduous task of transporting the wounded to the Far West steamboat. The vessel advanced as far up the river as possible before returning to the Yellowstone. Most of the injured somehow recovered, including Comanche, the sole survivor of Custer's command. Headquarters subsequently ordered that Comanche be provided a stall for life. He became a living memorial, tended to by a soldier of the 7th Cavalry Band, draped in black during parades, a silent symbol of the events that transpired on that fateful day. When everything concluded, the Sioux and Cheyenne dismantled their camp and proceeded onward, triumphant and unopposed. We were too defeated to follow. Their triumph was absolute, and thus the Battle of the Little Bighorn concluded, not in honor, but in quietude. If this narrative offers you a fresh viewpoint on the Great Sioux War of 1876, remain with this channel for additional untold historical accounts.